Is that sharing everybody now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on then, Adam.
So there we go. That's what's on the tin, and I've already spoken about that. This is about me and how I'm fairly obsessed with birds, so no apologies there. This is the patch I'm talking about this evening, the South Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. That's the green area there with the coastal strip, just an incredible part of the world. And as we said, because we're celebrating 60 years, it's actually been identified as a protected landscape for that long. All sorts of reasons why it should be protected. One of the main reasons is this amazing tapestry of special qualities from our rugged coastlines, our rear estuaries, our deeply incised rolling farmland, the combes that are full of woodland that flow throughout the whole landscape. We've also got these long distance views. We've got incredible wildlife, some really, really rare species within our pack. A very tranquil place as well. Hello? Oh, sorry. It's a very tranquil place as well. And that's one of the real qualities that we have here in South Devon. And it's that farmed landscape that really makes a difference with those long distant views over to Dartmoor. But that's not forgetting the hundreds of thousands of people that live on either side of our boundary in Plymouth and in Torbay. If people are going to be really getting the best out of bird watching, it's about knowing your habitats. It's about being able to read the landscape. And the habitats that we have are pretty unique to ourselves, really. These oak and wet woodlands with mature species within the Devon hedgerows are really special. The rear oaks alongside our estuaries are particularly rich in wildlife. And there's our meadows as well, and our farmed pastures, incredible for wildflowers. But those wildflowers themselves become the keystone for attracting some really rare invertebrates, butterflies, moths, incredible spiders and beetles. I'll say a bit more about that later. There's our maritime grassland. That coastal strip's really important with our cliffs and slopes and the sea caves. It is a farmed landscape. It's a living landscape. 74% of our whole landholding is farmed. But we've also got this incredible tapestry and mix of habitats with freshwater lagoons, marshes and reed beds, those sheltered estuaries. We've got rocky foreshore and the seagrass beds and coastal reefs. And we've got tiny little patches of shingle and sand dunes, salt marsh and mudflats. And that's because we're so rich in birds, because of that wealth of different sorts of habitats that they all depend upon. We're doing some work at the moment. It's nature recovery planning. And our nature recovery plans are aiming to actually really take a full inventory of what we have in terms of those habitats, looking at how we can make them bigger, better, and more joined up, so that the species that we do have here, we can help them increase their own populations. They can move and spread and be less squeezed to the coastline, which is currently happening. This big piece of work, we're still pushing towards the final document, but our nature recovery plan will really guide where we need to do our most conservation activity. Not just driven by birds, but driven by all wildlife. So tonight I'm supposed to be talking about the birds of summer. It's difficult to do, really. Birding's not best in the summertime. We're just sort of at that axis between seasons. For me as a bird watcher, it's already the autumn. For many non-bird watchers, it's the start of the summer. And when we actually look at our beautiful hay meadows, that's the sort of noise of all the crickets and the buzz of bees. And you might hear the odd skylark, but summer's more defined by insects and wildflowers than by birds. But as I said, what we really need is to make more space for nature. And we need a network of of countryside that is bigger, it's better, and it's more joined up. Well, I will get into the birds. We'll start with the largest, the mute swan. It's the largest British bird. We've got a good population, breeding population of mute swans within the AONB. They're just fabulous, though, aren't they? The cygnets are really coming on at the moment. It takes the youngsters a few years to get to adulthood and to start pairing off and breeding. They have lifelong partnerships. They're very, very loyal to the areas that they do breed. They're a resident bird. Even though they call them mute swan, they can make some quite large hissy noises. They can grunt as well. And they're particularly good parents. And we love seeing the mute swans. It's that way that they can just glide so effortlessly through our waterways. Well, from the largest bird within the AONB, we've got the smallest bird within the AONB, the goldcrest. It's a bird that breeds here. It weighs about the same as a 20p piece. And they're quite quiet at the moment. The fledglings are out there. They're mixing with groups of tits and tree creepers, and they're moving around through our woodlands in quite large groups. And that's so that there can be more eyes around. They're less likely to get picked off by a sparrowhawk if they're in a small flock of birds moving through our woodland or along our hedges. So it's a few weeks away yet before the goldcrest really starts to be a bit more vocal. And then we suddenly get this big pulse of goldcrests from continental Europe in the autumn time. But I'll be saying a lot more about this this movement of birds when I speak about the autumn in a few weeks' time. Well, let's stay with the theme of small birds. The little bird that makes a big noise, that's the wren. The Latin name for the wren is Troglodytes troglodytes. And that's because obviously they used to live in caves. And now they sort of live in caves. They nest in walls or in holes in trees. Very, very loud, very rapid song. That's the common wren. But at this time of year, if they're feeding chicks, almost every wren you see will have food in its mouth. And, you know, they're really tenacious little birds, and they work so hard to feed their chicks. They have quite a large brood of chicks. They might even get 2 sets of broods off in a season. So that could be a total of as many.
I have to unmute to talk to them, but I can't.
That have to be fed. So the wrens are very, very busy trying to feed those hungry mouths. Now, those that have already fledged, that are out there, like this little one, are just trying to find their own way. They've got a very high mortality rate, small birds like this. Bad weather conditions can see them off. And I'm not really sure, but I've got a feeling really warm evenings and the heat during the day could also be creating mortality, as well as you know, heavy rainfalls, or they have a tough time getting through the day and getting through the night. And you can just see with this youngster, it has a yellow gape, just the remnants of its gape there, bright yellow, looking a bit rubbery, but that's the visual impact that the adults respond to. When those little birds are screaming in the nests, they pop the insects into that yellow gape. That's the wren. That's a resident bird as well. So really, I've only talked about resident birds so far, but really it's about our summer migrants that I want to focus on a little bit. I suppose the swallow's the first summer migrant that comes to mind, because one swallow doesn't make a summer, but a load of swallows do make a summer, and they're just amazing birds with that twittering call. The way that they return to the same sites year after year. And as I say here, the reason they come here is so they can find a mate, they can find enough food, and they can find somewhere to nest. That's why the swallows come to the UK. And once they've found a mate, and they've started in the middle of April, perhaps the beginning of May, and they've set up a territory, and they've laid their eggs, and then the chicks arrive. Once again, swallows, they make the best of the daylight. You know, when you think in Africa, it gets light at 6 o'clock in the morning and it goes dark at 6 o'clock in the evening. So think of all that extra day length to be able to catch insects and feed these mouths. And like I say, two or three clutches of these birds will really wear out an adult. They'll be worn ragged at the end of the season before they're ready to fly back to Africa to survive the winter. And considering that swallows, I think averagely live about 5-6 years, just an amazing feat of nature to be able to raise chicks like this and leave them and let them work out the whole thing about migrating to Africa or not. Very similar to the swallows, we've got our house martins. I would love to have house martins under my eaves. I know they can make a mess, but I think it would be worth it. They're like little killer whales, little orcas with that blue-black above and white below, very distinctive white rump, a lovely sort of chattering call as well. They make their nests out of mud. And once again, another bird that does that huge north-south migration. But it's a while yet. They're not going to be heading off until September, October time, when they gather on the telephone wires, chattering away before they head off south. Just great birds, the house martins. Just at the moment, the organisation Devon Birds is giving away artificial house martin boxes that you can put under your eaves and just try and lead by example and see whether house martins will join a single box and build their own. Maybe you could apply and if you've got house martins in your village or in your area, maybe you'd be a suitable candidate to receive one of these boxes. And here are the swifts. They're the swallows, the house martins, and the swifts. They're real summer birds. They epitomise summer. I think I'm just going to put some swift noises on in the background for you. So the swifts go screaming through our villages. Just beautiful birds. They arrive at the beginning of May, but they're the first to sneak away, really. The beginning of, I suppose, even the beginning of August, some of the swifts already have started to move back to Africa. So their summer's pretty short here, really. That wonderful sound that you might hear outside your local church or flying past the post office. Just brilliant birds. But one of the incredible things is that when the swifts are first fledged, when they leave their nest holes, they don't actually land for 18 months. They fly thousands upon thousands of miles in that 18 months before they actually return to us and breed. The other incredible thing about the swifts as well is that in their lifetime, they actually fly something like 1.5 million miles. That's like flying to the moon 10 times and back. Just unbelievable creatures. And I always get really excited in May, just waiting for the swifts to come back. Sadly, less and less are coming back. And once again, another one of those birds that we have to work extra hard to make sure that they've got nest sites. But I think the big concern is that they actually have enough insects to eat. Not a huge amount we can do about that at the moment, but we do what we can. So when the swifts come, birds of prey come as well, the hobbies. That's the bird on the right here, and that's the bird that eats swifts and swallows in the summertime. And once again, it's one of our summer migrants that we're lucky enough to see. They're very fast, Not particularly brilliant photo here, but they're really hard to take photos of. Another bird that I see as being the sound of the summer, well, the sound of the spring, is the cuckoo. A bird whose population has been devastated in recent years in terms of them suffering on migration. But once again, the cuckoo has one of the shortest summers. It doesn't arrive here till perhaps the middle of May, and then it's off again in August. Birds that actually just manage to lay their eggs perhaps in a meadow pipit's nest, and then the poor old meadow pipits have to bring them up as an individual, as a singleton, before the cuckoo gets ready to fly to the Congo or further south in Africa. We're finding out a lot more about the cuckoos, really, and the way that they're suffering by climate change and having tidy countryside as well. Their habitat is also reducing. It would seem very, very sad if this bird gets any rarer than it already is. I've only heard a few cuckoos myself this year. Summer again. So all of the birds in summer are in their best bib and tucker. This is a male chaffinch. It's as bright as a chaffinch can get, and that's what we see right at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the season, I suppose. Same with our lovely blue tits as well. They can be so pristine throughout May. And same with the goldfinch. Birds that can be really brightly coloured, feathers almost perfect in every way. But if you go out and look for chaffinches or goldfinches or of any of our common breeding birds now, the adults will be looking really dishevelled. Just like most parents that are trying to bring up a brood of youngsters, it's hard work. All that constant feeding and chasing them around and looking out for them, they get really worn. So we will start to see worn individuals. And at the beginning of next month, these birds are going to have to go through a very, very quiet time. I think they're already going through a quiet time. That means they're in their molt. They're losing a lot of those damaged and worn feathers and growing new ones. So they're a bit under the radar at the moment. Summer's never really a brilliant time to go out bird watching. And when you do, some of the birds that you see aren't in the best of condition. So they change plumage as well. So when you look at our adult goldfinch there with that lovely red face and the beautifully etched head markings and bright golden wings, the youngsters have different plumages. So when you're out there bird watching, there's a lot to think about. Is the bird you're watching a youngster, a juvenile? Is it in molt? Is it showing feather coloration that you wouldn't normally see? Are you getting a bad view of it because there are leaves everywhere? So it's a real challenge bird watching in the summertime. But obviously there are birds that we all know and love, and the blackbird is one of my favourites. That fluty song that sort of filled our ears in the dawn chorus and throughout all of May has just tapered off a bit now. The blackbirds are singing a lot less. They're spending a lot more time looking for food to feed their youngsters. They even feed their youngsters when they've left the nest. And that must be such a huge job. So moving on from the male blackbird on to the female blackbird. Here she is, brown, essentially not black at all. But that ability to be able to carry 6 or 7 worms in one beakful and to go back and feed the chicks. And once, when I said birds look a bit dishevelled, she's working very hard, isn't she? You can just see that she's dedicated her life to feeding her youngsters and giving them the best chance before they go out there and face the world themselves. And there is one of the youngsters. Once again, it's you could begin to think, is it a song thrush with all those markings on the chest, with it being so brown? But that's a fledgling blackbird, and all of our breeding birds at the moment are putting youngsters out there that look quite a lot different than the adults. So this is the time of year I get all sorts of people asking me, they've seen a little brown job in the garden, they're not sure what it is. Well, sometimes that little brown bird or spangly golden bird could even be a robin. And robins, I haven't got a photo today, I don't think, but the young robins are some of my favourite birds. They're just, they're wonderful. I must get a good picture that I can share with you sometime. But there's lots of books, and our friend Google, of course, is full of pictures of young birds, and the robin's definitely worth checking out. When we're talking about the thrush family, song thrushes and blackbirds, there's the missel thrush, of course, a really strident, heavily spotted bird. They're just brilliant. And at this time of year, they've got a really strong, aggressive rattle when they're protecting their youngsters. But more than anything, the missel thrush gets involved in something called post-breeding dispersal. I love that. So all the youngsters get together and they fly around in flocks of about 20 birds. 20 missel thrushes in August is not an unusual sight. But those people that get caught out by the post-breeding dispersal of missel thrushes often contact me or get in touch with the RSPB, and they think a flock of fieldfares has arrived early. It's not. Fieldfares really don't get here, especially down here. They don't get here till October, November. But this post-breeding dispersal of many birds basically means that they get together in quite large groups so that they can increase their sort of visual range to look out for predators. So here's a young long-tailed tit. So what's the difference? Well, it hasn't got a long tail for a start. There's no pink on it. That black mask is much bigger than you'd get in an adult. Once again, I'm just pushing those buttons for you that a lot of the birds that you might know you can identify, the youngsters are out there to test your skills. I think most of the birds in my slideshow today have got food in their mouths, because really that's what it's all about, using the day length, finding as much food as possible and feeding their youngsters. Birds like meadow pipit, they breed on the ground, and they work hard to not overly show where their nest sites are. When they're first pairing up, they're flying together in the sky. They're making all sorts of obvious ways of showing that they're in the area. But now they've sort of gone under the radar a bit, and they're feeding their birds their chicks quite unobtrusively in the heather or in the gorse. Same goes with the skylark. Essentially, ground nesting birds, pretty difficult to take many notes on when you see them quietly on the ground, but they're still etching their song lines in the skies. A particularly distinctive bird of the South Hams across our farmed landscape. And we've got some good populations of skylark, but once again, they're all in pairs, or the youngsters are just starting to gather into small groups. So while I'm talking about these small brown birds, I can't really give a South Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty bird talk for any of the seasons without mentioning the Cirl bunting. This is the female. She's once again very, very unobtrusive. But one of the nice things about Cirl buntings is they really are the ultimate resident bird. They very rarely move a kilometre from where they've been born. So this female Cirl bunting, and this is the male. He's much more distinctive. And this is what they're looking like at the moment, actually. That's quite a worn individual. In May and in June, that sort of the head markings are far more distinctive and highly contrasting than that. The yellow's brighter. They sort of peak in May and June. Really, they're quite late breeders, so there's the youngsters aren't going to be fledging for a good couple of weeks. The youngsters particularly need invertebrates to be fed upon, crane flies and crickets and those sorts of things that you'll find in the arable field edgings. And it's in the winter that they particularly need to have seed to feed upon. And it's this mix of different sorts of foodstuffs that is a really limiting factor for Cirl buntings, but also it's allowed us to be able to work with farmers to conserve the Cirl bunting. So it really wasn't that long ago that there was only 100 pairs of Cirl bunting in the whole country. And those birds were just within the AONB. Now there's over 1,000 pairs of Cirl buntings within our patch, and there's a small population being established in Cornwall. So a real special bird for us to get to know and quite easily see on our on our hedgerows and on our coastal strip. So there she is, and there he is. And of course, there's the Yellowhammer. It's a similar bunting. And they sing "Little Bit of Bread and No Cheese." There he is with his, with his yellow head and his nice brick red rump. Just great farmland birds to have on our patch. There we go. So this was the bird that was making all the noise in the springtime, the whitethroat, probably one of the commonest birds in our hedgerows. And here's the whitethroat now. Really, really busy feeding the youngsters. And once again, these insectivores, that's one of the reasons that they come here for the summer, so they can make that best use of this wonderful glut of food. And the hours from, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning till 9:30 in the evening to be able to search out insects, feed themselves and feed their youngsters. So that's the whitethroat, very loud and scratchy in the spring and very, very quiet and busy in the summer. Same with the Willow Warbler, quite a common bird in and around the AONB. As you can see, this individual's quite bright. It's got this nice yellow hue on the underparts and over the eye. And then about this time of year, it's got really warm, still showing pale legs. That's the very distinctive part of a willow warbler against the chiff-chaff. And once again, beak full of food in the summer, worn plumage, working hard to feed the youngsters. But when the youngsters emerge, the juveniles, they've got this incredibly bright plumage. These fresh willow warblers are a beautiful lemon yellow, and once again, just that one single common species of bird changes plumage from arriving in April, feeling worn out in June, and then producing these beautiful youngsters. They're just great birds. The reed warblers in our reed beds, you often hear them more than see them. And I was at Slaps and Lee just last week, and they were still in song. And I think probably looking for another pair to produce a second nest. You could just about mistake the sedge warbler song from a reed warbler song. The reed warbler's got a very monotonous song, whereas the sedge warbler, he likes the jazz. It's a bit of a jazz version of the reed warbler, and I'll just play a little bit for you. You can hear it. These songs go on from dawn till dusk. And at this time of year, if you go for second brood, they really do sing that length of time. But many of them, they've quietened down and they're spending all their time feeding youngsters. That's the reed and the... is another favourite of, I think, anybody that walks along our coast path will see or hear stonechats. I'll play a bit. So the stonechat gets its name call. Here it is. It sounds like two flints being knapped together. Can you hear it? So it's a bird that you see before you hear it even, actually, because they do have this habit of sitting right on the tops of dead branches and bushes. Really good populations of them along our coastline. So once again, stonechats feeding the youngsters. They're catching all sorts. It looks like it's got a rove beetle there. Very broad set of insects that they're prepared to eat. They're once again resident birds, pretty hardy. They'll stay with us all year round. That's the stonechat, both males there. But then there's some youngsters. Once again, completely different plumage. There's the adult male and there's the youngsters. But they do still have the sort of what I call jizz, the general impression of shape and size. So the young stonechats are pretty well the same size as the adult stonechats. They have that general shape as well, with a large eye, a nice high rounded crown, short tails that they'll use to balance with. Very similar to the adults, but look at the difference in plumage there. There's the adult male and the youngsters, all out there to trick us, or just to sharpen our bird watching techniques. This is another one of those summer birds that comes and stays with us. It's not doing very well at the moment, actually. The spotted flycatcher numbers are pretty low. And they do what their name suggests, is they catch flies. And they find an open branch and fly from that branch to target an insect, 10 or 15 yards away. Once again, a bird that sometimes the full population is not here till June, and then they're off again in August. It's a really short breeding season, but that's so that they can really make the very most of that flush of insects in our countryside. Oh, I don't know how the yellowhammers got back there again. They just don't seem to be able to go away. But it's because I wanted to share the song of the yellowhammer. So the old country tale is that they say a little bit of bread and no cheese. Well, see what you can think of this, whether you think it actually fits. Some people ask me how do I know all my knowledge of bird calls? Well, it's not by reading the old village tales of what they sound like. The chaffinch is supposed to say, "Go fetch me a bottle of ginger beer." Well, you can't remember that many birds that way. The only way to do it, I find, is to actually just be out there and watch the birds sing themselves. And then it really is memorable. If you see a bird making the song, that's when you make the real connection. That's how I do it anyway. Here's a pretty tough bird, the rock pipit. So the rock pipit stays with us all year round, living in some very inhospitable places. I know the beaches and some of our rocky coves are beautiful now, but in the midst of winter, they're really tough places to be. And once again, the rock pipit, it suffers those harsh places to raise its young. And once again, they'll feed on a whole range of insects to keep the youngsters going. That was my segue to talk about the coast, really. So our cliff sites, especially at Berry Head, have got seabirds nesting there. So there's a guillemot colony of about 1,500 guillemots. And there's a large numbers of kittiwakes there as well. And at this time of year, they do the craziest things. The guillemots, their single egg has hatched. The young guillemot is, it's not very much bigger than, well, I suppose a tennis ball, a bit bigger. And the youngsters, they fly down the cliffs, down to the sea, and they call and expect the youngsters to make this death-defying leap hundreds of feet from the top of Berry Head onto the waters below. And that's exactly what they do. And it's the male guillemots that take these youngsters out on fishing trips, out into the bay, and teach them how to be guillemots, and teach them to dive and catch fish, and get used to their real natural habitat, which is the open sea. Remember, these birds, they only really come to land to nest in colonies. And we have the most southerly colony of guillemots in the whole of the UK. Same with the kittiwakes as well, really pelagic birds spending most of their time out at sea, and only the summertime on our cliff sites. The herring gull, it's a bird that I have quite a soft spot for, really. Some people really don't like their behaviour. They don't like the fact that they take advantage of our waste or the way we behave. Really attractive birds, I think, the herring gull. And when you see them here in a far more natural habitat than on the seafront or on a rubbish tip, a really special bird as well. But just the other day on social media, I saw something from Hastings Council, and some of it's, I don't know what you think of it. Some of it's quite interesting. Gulls aren't the problem. There are 7 billion of people that are the problem. They haven't invaded our territory. We've invaded theirs. It's quite interesting, with their cliff nesting habitats. They just see buildings as that. They're becoming more unusual. I know they're becoming bolder. It's an interesting debate, but there we go. I've always had a soft spot for the gulls, the family of gulls, and usually recognise that we're perhaps giving them the bad reputation that they don't deserve. Well, keeping on the thinking about the sea, the Manx shearwaters are just starting to move now. There's been a few records this last few days, actually. Manx shearwaters, they live till they're about 50 years old. They travel thousands upon thousands of miles on the open oceans. But this is the bird in the summer that I really wanted to mention. It's the Balearic shearwater. It's a very rare bird, and it does spend quite a lot of the summer in Lyme Bay. And the numbers of Balearic shearwaters are being recorded almost daily now off our coast, off the AONB. And once again, it's a relatively new phenomenon that we're just starting to find out about. So it's essentially, as it says, the Balearic shearwater. It's from the islands in the Mediterranean, and they spend the autumn, the late summer and the whole of autumn with us off our coasts. Other coastal birds are like the sandwich tern. This one here with a sand eel. There are sea swallows, essentially, the tern family. Once again, they suffer as being ground nesting birds, but finding places where they can breed without being disturbed, it gets increasingly hard, not just in the AONB, but across the whole of the UK. The other terns, the sea swallows, we've got the common tern to the left there, the Arctic tern to the right. So the Arctic tern sees more daylight than any other living creature, because it spends the summer in the Arctic and the winter in the Antarctic. Essentially only a migrating bird for us in South Devon. But as you can see, it looks very similar to the common tern. And, you've got to be a pretty good birder to be able to really tell the difference on the offshore views that we get of these birds. Just at the moment, we've got some sea ducks off our coast. Small numbers of common scoter are starting to build in little rafts just within Lyme Bay and within Start Bay. And these numbers are going to build until till the autumn time, when we've really got a large population spending the winter with us here. Then there's our sort of more breeding ducks that we've got here on our estuaries. This is a shell duck with some goslings. And those of you might have heard this noise, but not known what it is. But I just love the unusual song, and I mean a song, of the shell duck. Whole mix of birds calling there. So the strange sound is the shell duck. I can also hear some curlews in the background, and they're starting to come down from the hills, and the non-breeding birds are on our estuaries. So the shell duck, the goslings just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the adults are starting to, throughout August, they'll be sat on our sandbags, molting, changing those feathers. So by the time November comes, these youngsters and the adults will be identical. So the wading birds are starting to move. It is, like I say, it's just this axis part of the year. And just in this lovely photo here, we've got northern breeding birds that are just passing through. So we have the whimbrel, which is like a small curlew, the sanderling, like a winter plumage dunlin, and then there's the dunlin there with his black belly. And when you see wading birds at this time of year, it can be quite confusing. Are they in summer plumage? Are they in winter plumage? Are they in transitional plumage? So this little set of dunlins here, they're all showing a certain amount of the dark belly. And there's another set of dunlin here, lots in transitional plumage. So this time of year you've probably gathered, it's quite confusing. But the waders are moving. The common sandpiper, once again, a bird that breeds on Dartmoor, comes and spends the post-breeding season on our estuaries. Great little birds, the common sandpipers. And then the other waders, they all do look pretty similar. The wood sandpiper, this is possibly a failed breeder. There was one last week in our area. It's a bird that had gone to Scandinavia, couldn't find a mate, so it's just decided to scratch this year as a breeding year and start heading south to Africa. And so there are these relatively early autumn migrants just passing through at the moment. So go to the greenshank. So a lovely little group of greenshank on the Yellowhammer estuary just the other evening. They're great birds. The great crested grebes, they're birds that we've been looking at throughout the summer. And you can see here, there's a youngster hitching a lift off the male there with that stripy head. And those chicks just get bigger and bigger. And, you know, identifying young birds can be a real challenge. You know, the moorhens, the coots, the water rails, all black when they first hatch. And then they go through these incredible plumage transformations. So here's that great crested grebe again. They take a bit longer. You can see it's still got that humbug head of the youngster. So the goslings, they're all they start off really quite attractive, but just at the moment the lemon yellow goslings are looking, they're not ugly ducklings really. They don't look like they've actually developed into the adults at all for quite some time. Same goes to the mallards. And sadly, what happens is that they have the first clutch of anything like 10 or 12 ducklings. And by now, they've probably whittled down to about 5 individuals. And then by the winter time, there'll only be a couple that have made it to adulthood. It's a tough time for birds. So I think I've given you the impression that bird watching in summer is really quite hard work. Not only just identifying them, but but actually finding them because of what they do. Really, they're either molting, or they're not singing anymore, or they're moving around in quiet flocks. So a lot of bird watchers or naturalists, they get really interested in insects, and this really is the time for the big butterfly count. We're actually in the big butterfly count now. It goes on until the beginning of August. And if you look on Butterfly Conservation's website, there's this great bit of citizen science. So you can get involved in helping us find out a lot more about the butterflies, not just in the South Devon AONB, but across the whole country. And they're relatively easy to identify, a lot easier than birds, I think. There are fewer of them. Most are really quite distinctive. And on days like today, they sit nectaring on all sorts of wildflowers. So do get involved. This is an Adonis blue, and we just have some of the most spectacular insects on our patch. I don't apologise for talking about insects on a summer bird watching talk, because it's the sort of thing that will be catching your eye and piquing your interest when you're out there looking for birds and failing. Same goes for the dragonflies. They've got brilliant names. We've got a whole suite of darters. We've got a whole set of chasers. We've got the damselflies as well to delight us, and the demoiselles. Now, they really are difficult to identify. Some of the differences between the individual species is really tiny. And, if you've got binoculars, and they're close focus binoculars, you've got a good chance of being able to put a name to most of these wonderful flying creatures. We've got a lot of botanists as well. We before all of this not being able to get out there together, we used to lead walks to go and see some of our incredible wildflowers. This is the small flowered catchfly, a very, very rare species indeed. But even our common wildflowers are there to delight us. And so once you're out looking for birds, you're going to see fantastic wildflowers as well as all of those insects. I can't help but mention the two really special insects that are driving our Life on the Edge project. It's the long-horned mining bee on the left on a bird's foot trefoil, and the six-banded nomad bee, the rarest bee in Britain. And you're going to be hearing a lot from the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty about our efforts to try and conserve this rarest bee in the UK and stop it from going extinct. And it's flying on the seat of its pants at the moment, a very, very rare insect indeed. But of course, when you're out looking for these insects, you might see this glittering beauty. Probably one of the most attractive red-tailed bee. It's a solitary bee, the red-tailed solitary bee, just stunning. And those of you that can have the patience and get close enough and have got the right camera kit can capture some of these incredible creatures, whether it be the wasp spider or one of the larger hoverflies. The summer is it's just full of. Now, there was a time where I'd say it was just full of bird food, but I'm starting to get a lot more interested in the invertebrates. Our partner, the Bug Life, the national invertebrate charity, has really shown me how incredible life is in macro. So a lot of the smaller creatures that we see are equally as fascinating as those big, beautiful birds like the mute swan. And of course, there's our glowworms. It's a beetle, really. So even if you're out in the evenings looking for owls, whether you'd be looking at barn owls or tawny owls, there's a good chance that you'll see some glowworms across our patch. I saw some quite recently at Tor Cross. Just fascinating. It's the females that glow, and it's the males that are out there at night looking for them. So in terms of finding out where you can go in the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, our website, I say it myself, it's fabulous. We've got some really good walks that you can actually do remotely. You can download some of those walks so you can feel confident to be able to walk in our countryside and not get lost. Within some of those downloadable walks, there are some sound bites, there are some videos, really worth having a look. But there's nothing better than actually getting out there and doing it yourself. Once again, look through our walks, listen to some of our audios. You can download these walks so that you can actually get out there yourself. And they're all birdie. They're all full of really great wildlife. And we'd love to hear from you as well and hear about some of your experiences out there in your own countryside. So there's the big plugs really. Look at South Devon AONB website. There's lots to see. Perhaps have a look at Devon Birds. You can get some really up-to-date information about what wildlife is seen where. And, you know, I think one of the best ways to find about wildlife, and the fun way to find about wildlife, is just talk to people that have got binoculars on. Or if people seem to just, if they're looking in the distance, or just ask people what they've seen, if they've seen any wildlife. It's definitely something that you can make friends, you can pass some lovely time talking to people that maybe have a specialism. They might be a hoverfly expert and tell you incredible things about the marmalade hoverfly, or they might be spider experts and tell you about the moon spider. There's just incredible wildlife out there in our patch. So this is just a snapshot from the weekend from the Devon Birds website. Somebody saying what they'd seen at West Charlton Marsh. Quite interesting to see that they'd seen a cattle egret. On a little boat trip out from Brixham, the Balearic shearwater was out there, and some of these guillemots and razorbills and sandwich terns, birds that I've mentioned. Somebody's seen a red kite recently in Torbay. So yeah, it's always good to, oh, and there's the common scoters again, just to get a good idea of what's been seen where. I bob onto this website quite a lot just to take a passing interest about what other people are seeing. I think I do have to mention climate change. I've also talked a little bit about our biodiversity emergency, and one of our local authorities, Southampton District Council, that's not forgetting Plymouth City and Torbay, but there are ways that you can get involved in trying to help with the conservation work, and just understand that the local authorities, they are doing a lot of work to try and turn things around. And as an area of outstanding natural beauty, I think nature conservation is very squarely one of our target areas at the moment, and we're doing what we can to engage people and to get people to recognise that once it's gone, and we have to look after our heritage, our natural heritage. It's as important as anything, really, that our children's children can enjoy some of the wildlife that I've shared with you this evening. The seasons fly by for me. I'm sure they do for you. And the more in touch with the seasons you are, the more you recognise that things change on a daily basis. And it's not going to be long before I'm going to be here again in the ether talking about the birds of autumn. It's going to be really focused on a whole new set of birds that I haven't talked about today, birds that are spending the winter with us, or where those summer birds are, whether they're still hanging on or whether they've already set off. So it's been a pleasure speaking to you this evening. If we can work the technology out, perhaps Nikki could